Hello Namibia, and welcome back to another episode of Windows of Wealth powered by PSG Wealth Namibia, your financial wellness talk show. Today we've got a powerhouse of a lady. She started her career as a lawyer in Uganda, her home country. She then moved to Zimbabwe, where she also practiced law. In Namibia, predominantly focusing on corporate affairs and being the marketing executive for a number of years to one of Namibia's largest groups. She is none other than the powerhouse Gida Nakazibwe-Sekandi. Ms. Gida, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Christoph. Thank you.
Ms. Gida, let's just take it back. We know you to be a director of companies. Tell me about where it all started, where you grew up, and how was that for you?
I was born in Uganda, as you've already mentioned.
Yes.
I'm the first child of 7 children from a first family.
Yeah.
But I'm the first child of 14 children. I was born in a rural Uganda. Grew up with my grandfather, my father, and my siblings. And the parents were teachers, so clearly a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
Lots of focus on developing the right manners, respect.
Is it?
Hard work and all those kind of values that tend to come out of teacher parenting. That attitude or positioning of worrying about other people and trying to help, trying to be helpful and supportive.
Your environment basically just gave that to you
naturally. To me, naturally.
So tell me about your, let's say, primary, secondary school.
Okay, so I went to boarding school because my father was an educationist, so he used to be transferred from one city to another.
And you would just...
And eventually he decided to put us in boarding school so that we are not destabilized in terms of education. So I went to a boarding school. It was a co-ed school, as they call them. It's a mixed school with boys and girls. I went to school at the age of 7. We didn't do creche in those days.
Yeah.
So I went to King's College Budo from primary 1 until high school, which would have been your metric level.
Yeah. So in one school, same how do you call it in Namibia, a hostel or...
Yeah. Different hostels, because obviously the junior school was separate from the senior
junior
school.
And the senior.
The senior school, but the same road to school.
1 to 12. And tell me, did you have any leadership positions when you were in school?
I was a prefect class prefect. I was in the choir. I did a lot of acting.
Yeah.
I was a dormitory, prefect in high school. But I had small leadership roles within the school environment.
Yeah. So leading up to when you finished school, what were your hopes and aspirations? Being in grade 12 at the time, what did you want to do, and how did it end up naturally?
I actually wanted to be a journalist.
Yeah.
And I hoped that I would end up, either in TV journalism, and that is because my father eventually ended up in educational television. He actually set up the first education television. A station in Uganda Broadcasting, corporation. And I thought that would be interesting, to maybe do script for television material or do writing.
So his role as an educationist and on being on the television, that sort of inspired
me. Yeah. But also the acting. Yeah, I thought there was something there about acting and writing and singing and music.
You also just enjoyed that, hey?
Yes, I enjoyed it, and I did quite well in fairly complex plays like Othello, Macbeth.
Yes,
those kind of roles where you really need to be in the act. So I did quite a bit of that. Yeah. I enjoyed singing. I enjoyed choir music, that type of thing.
Journalism was a well-respected profession as well because they were putting a lot of news out there.
Yeah.
So ultimately, how did you end up from wanting to be a journalist to studying law as well? And did you study locally?
Yeah. Okay. So I went to university in Makerere. Makerere University was the national university. And I joined the third law faculty. In any case, I ended up being a lawyer.
Yeah.
But I think it has prepared me well for the ability to be agile.
Yes.
And to be able to land in any situation and figure out things, because you ask questions, you research, you uncover facts, and you put a picture together.
Yeah, and you're well informed about the regulatory foundation.
Exactly.
Whether it's corporate, whether it's civil, whether it's criminal, It's got a good foundation.
So I always believe that it doesn't matter what you study. All that it does, it teaches you how to think. So law taught me how to, put a box around things and be able to almost figure out stuff.
And just apply certain concepts and
exactly
theoretical concepts within the reality.
Yeah.
So tell me about your early days as a lawyer. Were you practicing in Uganda?
I practiced in Uganda with the Department of Public Prosecutions for 5 years.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Zimbabwe and I practiced there for about another 4 years.
Yeah.
And I mainly specialized in criminal prosecutions.
So when you basically practice as a public prosecutor, did you ultimately for the remainder of your life, what did you see? How did you see it play out?
I think when I was a public prosecutor, I thought I would migrate to the bench. So I would go and become a magistrate, and then maybe from being a magistrate, move towards becoming a judge in the High Court.
Yes.
But because we moved away from Zimbabwe, where I had the opportunity to do that, and came to Namibia, I had to, abandon that and stoop to conquer.
Yeah.
Find something else to do.
Let's talk about that. You said you moved from Uganda to Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Why were you moving to Zimbabwe?
We moved from Uganda in 1980 due to political instability there. There's no other country in the world that is like Namibia. Yeah. So there's been an opportunity.
Exactly. So when you moved from Zimbabwe to Namibia now, in terms of your professional career, tell me a bit more about that, because you said you did practice law in Zimbabwe as well.
Yeah.
Was that the same case when you came to Namibia?
No, when I came to Namibia, remember we came here in the late 80s.
Yeah.
So the language of business was Afrikaans. And I couldn't speak Afrikaans. So I think that excluded me from being able to practice law here.
Yeah.
But there's also some other nuances about English law in which I was trained, and Roman and Dutch law. Yeah.
Yes.
So I would have had to do some conversion.
Yeah.
And at that stage, there were no rules or regulations that allowed people to convert foreign degrees into the local environment. So I decided to find something else to do.
In terms of your professional career, when you got to Swakop, your husband was working at, or your ex-husband was working at Rio Tinto.
Yeah.
What was it like for you finding a job here and settling in?
I think not easy, because obviously if you come as a spouse, because in those days they called them expatriates.
Yes.
So, yeah. You don't necessarily get a job. So the job is offered to one of the spouse, and you've got to, either stay at home, take care of kids. And we only had one child at that stage. He was about 3 or 4 years old. And there wasn't really an opportunity for me to work in the profession.
Yeah.
So I took up opportunities to do temporary work at Rossing. The one that I found most fascinating was being a driver of we would call them the combi that used to pick up people from around this airfield, and drop them off in Swakopmund. So I was standing in for somebody who was on sick leave, and I did all the administration. I booked people's flights and accommodation.
Yeah,
picked them up from the airfield, took them to Swakopmund, picked them up in the morning, took them back. So I did a lot of admin type of clerical work. Yeah.
So from being a qualified practicing lawyer, public prosecutor, to doing admin work.
Yeah.
I mean, you were probably the most qualified administrator there at the time.
But I think what was interesting is what I learned by doing that work.
Oh.
I had so much respect for the person whose job it was, because you go through a lot of personal demands. I don't want to travel this way. I don't want to take that flight. I don't want to do this. So it gives you some flexibility. You learn how to deal with different requirements, how to prioritize them, how to serve others. So it wasn't a wasted opportunity. I felt I learned something, and guess what? I met a lot of people who had influence.
Yeah.
While I was driving the combi.
So let's touch on that point. When you say you met a lot of people that had influence, were you able to then foster the necessary relationships, networks?
Yeah.
And what happened after?
Well, they would ask me, okay, so when did you arrive here? Where you come from? They would have an interview with me like we're having.
Yeah.
How did you end up here? And what did you study? And I said, I'm a lawyer by training. He said, oh, you're a lawyer. Surely we can use you skills better
somewhere else.
And I said, well, there's no opportunity at the moment. So people started watching out for opportunities for me to be able to get into some kind of professional work, even if it wasn't strictly speaking law. So eventually I ended up working for the human resources manager as a technical advisor, mainly on labor issues. And then eventually I ended up in the industrial relations division of the company. At that time, they were combined public relations and industrial relations. And eventually I became the public relations officer for the mine. And the rest is history.
There's still a lot of history we need to go through. So, predominantly practicing as a lawyer, now moving into a PRO type of role. What were the principles that still stuck with you? Like we said, law is a very good foundation. What are some of the principles that still stuck with you?
You've got to be curious. You've got to investigate. You've got to research. You need to frame things, and you need to make sure that you are always pitching. Because as a lawyer, you are pitching your case to the court or to the judge. As a public relations person, you're pitching your company's message to the public. Yes. So you can use that skill to gather the information, to sensitize it, and to be able to pitch it. To represent, what the company you are representing stands for.
I love that link. So from the PRO type of role, what was next for Gida?
From being a public relations officer, I became head of communications and industrial relations. And there I was involved in union negotiations, representing the company in wage negotiations, dealing with union leaders, some of whom, I know were still around and became ministers in the Namibian government. So I connected with a lot of other people that were leaders in the union, that became leaders in the country. So that was also quite pleasing, is that I formed very strong relationships.
Like we said, the law background really gave you a strong basis. And paired with that, did you further your studies within the PRO type
Yes, I did some studies in public relations, management, and I did accreditation through the South African Institute of Public Relations. So that also helped to get some credibility behind, the work. I've done a number of self-study. I've done programs in industrial relations. So whatever I was doing, I always made sure that I upgrade my understanding and my knowledge.
Exactly. That's lovely to hear, Ms. Gida. So from where you were a corporate affairs executive, what was next for you in Namibia?
Okay, so I became a corporate affairs manager in the head office of Rossing in Windhoek in 1994. And times were hard at that time. Uranium prices had plunged, and we started restructuring the business to move as many functions of the company back to Swakopmund. And that was a time when I got involved in a lot of change management. And it was at that time that I got an opportunity to engage with Bank Windhoek, to be invited to consider taking up the marketing role in Bank Windhoek.
And so from corporate communications to marketing, it's more or less also similar structure and similar principles, would you say?
I think these are part of the same discipline, but they're specializations. Obviously, I had done a lot of work in public relations and communications, both internal and external, stakeholder engagement, external relations. Those belong to almost a family of mainly communication and engagement. But now you move into marketing and you are dealing with advertising, media, handling products, sales.
More in a creative type of space.
More creative space. And I wasn't really that kind of person, but my role was not to become the specialist in marketing. My role was to build a team.
To lead the team and to build the team.
So we structured the team and we built a strong team within the Bank Windhoek, which has now become bigger. And the idea was to make sure that we can compete in the marketing space with the other banks that seem to have had already well-established departments.
So what were some of the challenges? Because Bank Windhoek at the time, and we're talking, what year was this?
I joined Bank Windhoek in 2000.
So coming in with Bank Windhoek, what type of challenges, as a foreign black lady coming into the bank at that time, were there certain challenges that you dealt with?
I think the challenges there were cultural. I would like to think that there was a very Afrikaans culture in the institution because of its history. I mean, this is a bank that grew out of Volkskas Bank, Boland Bank, Trust Bank. These were predominantly South African banks that came together to form Bank Windhoek. So the culture was traditionally Afrikaans.
a gender-based discussion, and this is a very sensitive topic that people normally have. But coming back in the early 2000s, how did you manage to navigate a male-dominated industry? I would like to think that it was male-dominated. Navigating a male-dominated industry as a young black woman coming up. What tips and tricks would you share?
I think less about that I was black and I was female, more about what I was there to do and what I could contribute.
Yeah.
That was my
core focus.
That's the core focus. Because the minute you start focusing on yourself, I'm female, and I'm black, you so what?
Yeah.
What is your contribution going to be? Now, I'm not trying to underestimate the fact that when you're female and you're black, you always are at a disadvantage.
Yeah, because the environment you're
in might not necessarily be very accommodating. But my choice was always to focus on what is my contribution?
Yeah.
What am I here to do? What difference can I make?
Yeah.
How can I use my unique qualities
of
being female and being black
to make a difference?
To actually make a difference and to enrich the environment in which I work.
Yeah.
To teach other people about who I am and what I can bring.
Exactly. Because just because the minority doesn't mean that there's not skills and knowledge that you have that they don't have, because that's probably the strength. So play according to your strengths.
I was an outsider in the country and I was an outsider in that culture. I didn't speak Afrikaans. So that was a challenge. And yet working in communications, it was important that I'm not too defensive about the fact that some people couldn't really speak English.
Yeah.
Or they didn't feel comfortable speaking English.
Yes.
Because if a message has to be understood, it must be understood in the language that people are comfortable with.
Yeah.
I also realized that Afrikaans was not only spoken by the Afrikaners, but was spoken by
the entire
country.
Yeah.
Because that was what was happening, the pre-independence. So I had to find my way to to get documents translated.
Yes.
To be tolerant of people speaking Afrikaans when I'm in the room.
And
and not to be too sensitive about that. When I joined the bank, I was given almost like a 10-point plan of what things the bank wanted to achieve at that point in time and what marketing department's contribution was going to be. So I focused on that almost on a daily basis. I knew the journey that we were going to travel. I knew what my role was going to be. And I tried to focus my mind on just having enough energy and enough grit, as they call it, to walk that journey
and to push through.
And not be distracted.
You were confident. You knew what you were doing. You were competent. And
what I didn't know, I always asked for advice.
Yeah.
If I can't claim that I knew everything at that time, but I knew how to build relationships and how to network so that I can get the inputs that I need in order to achieve the results.
And how to build the team that you necessarily need to get the specific outcome.
And I knew that my role was to leave a team that is strong and resilient and robust and competent to deliver the marketing and branding and communication services to the bank and to its clients. So that was the focus. Focusing on what the purpose is and
why the outcome is.
Why are you there? If you get distracted with other small things, in every organization there's some troubles and there's challenges, but if you know where you're going, you navigate them.
So the key is to be goal-oriented and not lose focus for the distractions.
You know what you're there to do. You've been given a brief, just execute.
So I would like to think that you did a great job if you ended up as the Capricorn Group's marketing executive from being marketing manager.
Yeah. Well, I think, maybe I did. But I think it was also, opportunities we started growing, the bank grew. We had ideas of going into other parts of Africa. I moved from the bank and I moved into corporate marketing where we supported Bank Abaroni and Kavmont Bank. And I added other things to my portfolio, as coordinating the strategic, planning processes of the company at that time. And we had many other things. I did some research that led to the establishment of the Capricorn Foundation.
Yes.
So I did a couple of things that just broadened my horizons.
Yeah.
But the most exciting was to work on a new bank in Botswana.
And let's say for someone sitting out there that's moving from managerial to executive type level, that needs that specific knowledge. You said that attend seminars, to do workshops. What else can one do?
You can attend formal training. You can go to a business school. You can these days you can learn things online.
Yeah.
But I think there's nothing more than reading about something. If you don't understand the subject, go and read about it and try and understand how the practical aspects of it, of that theory, would actually work. The
Yeah.
good thing about learning on the job is that you can take the theory and you can see whether it works in practice.
Mm.
And you can also check the practice against the theory to see whether it's aligned.
Yeah.
So a lot of self-learning,
Yeah.
I think, is required
Exactly.
for you to be able to make sure you understand enough to be able to lead. Be flexible.
Yeah.
Always look out for opportunities. Be agile.
Yeah.
You should be able to say, wow, okay, this is what I studied, this is what I wanted to do, but I see that opportunity there. What do I need to exploit that opportunity?
Yeah.
Or to optimize it? And be open-minded.
On that same point, if you had to look back and could go back into time and have a message for Miss Young Gida, starting off, just finishing high school, what would that message be?
You should have a broad-based approach to building your career. You should be covering the baseline that you need to be able to switch careers in the future. For example, if I had done languages, for example, if I had studied French when I was studying, or if I had done some accounting in school, or if I had done some IT studies, even if rudimentary, that would have opened up other avenues.
For you.
So in my case, I mean, I studied history, English literature, etc., because those were the offers that we got. And then I went into law, and in law I did the traditional courses. But try and broaden your base, and also try and pick up skills that you may need, that you may never. For example, some people learn to use technology when they are in the workplace, but you should know how to use technology beforehand. You need to build technology education in your mix. So I think it's about being broad in your approach as you build your career, so that you are able to be competitive.
So as you know, that we at PSG Wealth, we're focused on holistic financial planning. So it would be unjust for us if we don't focus on some sort of conversation around wealth creation or finance betterment within our own personal lives. So if we can just shift the conversation a bit towards that, understanding from your professional career and how you've built yourself up, at what point did you start focusing on wealth creation? Tell us a bit more about that.
I would define what I considered to be wealth creation. The first thing was family, to build a family. Because remember, I was the eldest child of 7, among the family of 7. I have extended family. I was raised and looked after by extended family members. They have their children. They expect some kind of support. So the first objective was to say, how do I help the family? And how do I give back to the family that brought me this far? So that was important. And wealth for me was also not, it wasn't well defined initially, because I wasn't particularly too focused on becoming very wealthy, being super rich. I grew up in a kind of middle class type of family, maybe lower middle class. And then I started looking at more security. So I looked at more about financial security. I looked more about being able to sustain myself, because I was now not married. I was divorced. I had a child to raise. So the focus was less about accumulation of things. It was more about
being secure, stable.
And stable, being able to provide for my son and make sure he goes through the best education money could buy, making sure that I've got enough to sustain myself and I'm not dependent on other people, but more predominantly it's making sure my family, my siblings are able to also succeed.
Do that,
life.
Within your career, I know a lot of people call it black tax, quote unquote black tax. Navigating that, how do you still make sure that you support your family for the betterment of themselves, but still make sure that you are stable and secure, as you mentioned?
I think you prioritize. You can only give if you have enough to share. Sometimes you make sacrifices. But I think you also need to prioritize in what aspects are you going to support the family. It can't be all things to everybody. So my choice was always to support on the education side. If anybody was struggling with education, it's school fees or books or accommodation.
That is where your focus
Or
was.
travel. You've got a scholarship to go and study in Australia, but you don't have the ticket. Everybody knew that if it was anything else that is a bit frivolous from my perspective, you probably won't come to me.
Yeah.
But that's how I chose to do it. You have to prioritize, but you need to make sure that you're secure, that you're not exposing yourself. And that's why you have to contract with your family in what aspects you can be expected to support. So that's how I approached it.
Yeah. So going back to when we had the conversation on, you went from being a practicing lawyer in Zimbabwe and you moved over this side to Namibia, but you didn't really have work at the time. Did you feel some sort of financial pressure at the time because you had to support your family back home, but you didn't really have a job, a fixed job at the time?
Yeah, but my family knew I was not working.
Yeah.
So I could land it, and I had to ask the husband to give me something to
send back
which
home.
is not always easy.
Yeah.
But I mean, it didn't last very long. So eventually I could earn something. And we had a young child in the house, so we also couldn't really give much, but you do what you can within your means.
Yeah. So taking it back from where the focus is being stable and secure to being, let's call it comfortable.
Yeah.
I think that's the word we've used often in our engagements. Moving to being financially comfortable or comfortable with the decisions that you've made to get to that point.
Yeah.
And we don't want to use the word wealth too loosely. How did you build your personal portfolio to the point?
So I think it's okay to use the word wealth because that's what you're about.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be
exactly, we're wealth managers.
It would be detracting from the purpose of this interview. But I think from a wealth perspective, first of all, it was important to own a home. So I started off by saying, well, I need to own my own home. When I got into Bank Windhoek, a lot of people, my colleagues and my peers, were mainly focused on that asset class, building their property portfolio. So I learned from the others.
Yeah.
And then the next thing was the company offered us shares, which we had to pay for, by the way. They were not free, contrary to popular opinion. We had to pay for them in some shape or form. There was a soft loan that was allocated, and you would use your dividends to settle, to reduce the loan. Then I invested in Capricorn shares.
And obviously you worked for the
and I worked for the company, so I invested where I worked.
And you knew that the outcomes and the team you're building,
exactly,
it will
so
go
it
good.
gives you some sense of ownership. I invested in some insurance products.
Yeah.
And some, obviously when you're working, you have pension.
Yes.
So it's been very traditional.
Yeah.
I haven't ventured into cryptocurrency yet.
Yet.
And I'm not sure if I would do so.
Yeah.
But I've done a couple of other things, invested with other women in mining, property, where we are trying to pursue some projects.
So that sounds like a very diverse portfolio to me, because you've got some property, you invested a lot in the stocks with Capricorn, and the share price has performed very well. I mean, the share price just hit 20 Namibian dollars the other day.
Yeah.
So at some point you bought them for a pretty reasonable price, and like you said, it's paid off, and you're comfortable.
I think it's been stable. It's one can never be over comfortable because the value of money is always changing.
Yeah.
But I think two things that I wanted to say here is that, so if you look at my portfolio, there will be things which I've invested for myself.
Yeah.
There will be stuff that I've invested because my child will benefit.
Yeah.
There are things that I've invested with other women so that we can build each other.
Yes.
And there are things that I've invested with my family so that we can build each other.
Exactly. That's a very important focus, to have a goals and needs approach.
Exactly.
To be like, this is for inheritance. This is for myself.
Yeah.
This is more for
community.
Yeah. Value investing. Yeah.
Value investing so that we can lift ourselves as well.
Yeah.
So those are quite the tricky ones because we're all busy, and we try and find a property project and we invest together. These are long-term investments, so sometimes it takes time before you can see the benefits.
Let's talk about your outlook on building wealth today versus when you started off. Let's say when the first salary came in, where you were like, fine, this is a salary you can work with in terms of building wealth or putting something away. What is your view now versus then?
I think the rules haven't changed. You're supposed to split your salary into 3 parts. One you save, emergency, and the others you live off when you pay whatever it is. That's the ideal.
Yeah.
Today, I think if I had to choose asset classes today, maybe I wouldn't really invest in property. I'd probably invest in more liquid stocks. And I would diversify my stocks across different sectors. you can actually still invest in property without having to own the property.
Exactly.
That makes it easier when you get to the stage where you don't have to manage tenants and paint and do stuff.
Yeah.
So I think there are better choices now to make. And that's why you need people like PSG or other wealth managers to advise you of what is available.
Yeah.
There's something called, people talk about concentration risk.
Yes.
You know, when everything is in the same pot and it's in the same country.
Yeah.
How do you diversify your investments abroad?
Yeah.
What are the risks that are inherent in that? So I've had a lot of discussions with other wealth managers who have got international portfolios to see how do you diversify.
Yeah.
So that's what I would advise people to do, is be educated about what is available and make sure that you diversify and you de-risk your portfolio as well.
That is a very strong message, Machida. I don't think the people, the viewers at home understand how strong that message is and how much they can actually benefit from having such a diverse
do
portfolio.
It as you start. Do it early on, because
do it early on. That's another message.
Exactly.
And I was just about to ask, do you have any message in terms of wealth creation for the youth out there? What would you say?
Start when you start.
Start early,
Early.
And then diversify
your portfolio,
your exposure. Yeah?
I mean, the unit trust, for example.
Yeah,
you know, it's easy to enter the unit trust.
Exactly, and it's so diversified. It's crazy with the
government bonds, you know, treasury bills, all this stuff. There's so many instruments that you can use, but start early and start with the little that you have.
Yeah,
build up. Yeah,
sure. So, Majida, like I said, that's a very strong message. Majida, thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Okay.
There's one more part of the show that I really want your insights on, and that's the part called 5 on 5 with PSG Wealth. Yeah? And that's where we ask you 5 personal questions, and you can answer them as quickly as possible. But it's just to give our viewers some insights to Ms. Gida Nakazibwe-Sekandi.
Thank you.
Are you ready, Ms. Gida?
Yeah.
So, question number 1: if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Resilience.
Ooh. You've already got so much of that, Ms. Gida. Question number 2: if you could solve one problem in the world, what would it be and why?
Poverty.
Because
it just seems so unfair that some people go to sleep at night without food, that they have no shelter.
Yes.
And it's everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
It's not only in Namibia, it's not only in Eastern Africa, it's everywhere. So that always gives me a knot in my stomach that I'm helpless to do something about.
Sure.
Right?
Thank you, Ms. Gida. Question number 3: what is your most memorable travel experience?
Singapore.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Next question: if you could eat or drink one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be?
My lemon water.
Yes.
And ginger and cucumber and
high antioxidant benefits. Yes. Drink it every day.
I like that.
And then the last one, Ms. Gida. Looking back at life, what accomplishment are you most proud of?
I think the influence that I've had on many people, my friends, their children.
Yes.
I've got one child, but I've got lots of children.
Yes.
That I claim to be mine, and they claim me to be their mother. I've taken care of other children that didn't have an opportunity. I've taken care of my people that support me at home, and they become family. And obviously, raising my son.
Yeah.
That has been the most precious gift.
Yeah. That's so touching, Ms. And I'm sure you'll still touch many lives out there and influence, especially with this interview as well, influence many lives out there.
Thank you.
Ms. Gida, I want to thank you for being our guest on Windows of Wealth today. For our viewers at home, thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to having you on another episode of Windows of Wealth again. Ms. Gida, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.